Hi, welcome to Titan Tips, a short video series where we here at Titan Reloading try to make your future reloading sessions just a little bit easier. My name is Michael, and today we're going to continue talking about the Loadmaster, more specifically the indexing system on the Loadmaster. Before I get too far into that, I do want to mention a few things. One, these presses are not set up to operate right out of the box. So when you get it, it may seem like it is indexing properly, but it isn't set up perfectly. There are definitely some adjustments that you're going to want to make to the indexing system, to the primer feed, to everything on this press before it's going to run smoothly for you. Secondly, with each Loadmaster you get from us, we do include a printed out copy of instructions that my dad, one of the owners of Titan Reloading, has written up. You can also find these instructions on our website under the FAQs. So without any further ado, let's start talking about the indexing system on this press, starting with the operations. There are a few parts that are a part of the indexing system. So there's the shell plate carrier. Of course, it's the shell plate that indexes. There is the indexing rod and flipper here, and then the frame itself is a part of the indexing system. So when you bring the ram all the way to the top, there's a little nub here that is going to set the indexing flipper over to the side. It's going to cant it over, and then it's going to ride down this rib here until it gets kicked out by this part of the frame. And then as you bring it up, you're just going to push the indexing rod forward, which is going to be what forces this to index. As you just saw, there is this piece here that kicks out the brass, but it also has another function. Let me see if I can get the camera just a little bit closer in here. There is this tail here, and what this tail does is it sits inside these little holes and it stops it from being able to go backwards. So that is the indexing system. Setting up the indexing system on the Loadmaster is a pretty simple and straightforward process. Before you start getting into the actual setup to the press though, you are going to want to double check the indexing rod and flipper here. If you look at the edges, let me zoom that or get the right focus. So if you look at the edges, you can see that the majority of them are a perfect 90-degree angle, except for this one here. This one does have a slight bevel, and what that allows it to do is when you're pushing the indexing rod back in, it gives it enough space to push on the star-shaped bottom here and still slide through the shell plate carrier itself. If you do not have that bevel facing to the right or towards the case feeder, it'll actually lock up and pinch it in place, and it will not allow you to push that indexing rod all the way, at least not easily, and that'll cause a very jerky function of your indexing system. So after you have that double checked, the next thing you're going to want to do is align the shell plate carrier. Because of the operation of this on the Loadmaster, if the indexing rod is not snug up against the ram here, it is not going to index. So what you're going to want to do is bring the ram all the way up and about halfway down to where you have the flipper up against the rib that protrudes from the Loadmaster. It is the second rib down if you are having issues locating it. The next thing you're going to want to do is make sure that that circular portion of the flipper rod is up against this rib, and then you are going to want to turn the shell plate carrier clockwise so that it is snug up against this rib. After you've accomplished that, you'll want to tighten the draw bolt at the bottom of the press to about 11.6 foot-pounds of pressure, and that is going to be enough to hold that shell plate carrier in place, but not too much that you're going to be damaging anything. After you've accomplished that, you're going to want to just restart it from the bottom and then give it a few test goes to make sure that everything is running smoothly. But that is the setup for the indexing system on the Loadmaster. There are a few issues that can arise with the indexing system on the Loadmaster. One of them is going to be that at the bottom of the stroke here, it becomes very difficult to push the indexing rod forward and index the shell plate. Now, as I've mentioned in the setup tutorial portion of this, one of the main reasons for that is going to be not having this beveled portion here facing the right direction. So you want to pull it out, double check that it's facing to the right. If that is facing the right way, then there's going to be another possibility. One, if you have this nut on top tightened too much and you don't have the little O-ring below it, that could be causing it to pinch in place. The other suggestion that we would have is to lube the inside of this ring here. And what that'll do is allow it to turn more freely as you're attempting to index the press. The other issue is when you are bringing the ram back down, the flipper is not catching on this rib here. The solution for that is probably that the carrier is out of alignment. So you're going to want to go through the carrier alignment process again, which is what I discussed in the tutorial, to double check and make sure that this is catching on that rib as it's supposed to. If you have realigned the shell plate carrier and is still having an issue catching on this rib portion here, the next thing you'll probably want to do is double check the flipper itself. So if you're looking at this flipper here, you can see that there are a ledge here, that there is a ledge here. And what that ledge does is it catches on the rib, and it's what causes it to pull out. Over a good amount of use, or if it gets beaten up for any reason, you will lose the sharpness of that ledge, and it will not be able to catch on the rib on the ram like it's supposed to. And what you may have to do is replace this piece here to allow it to grip that rib like it is supposed to. Another thing I want to talk about to ensure that you have your indexing system running as smoothly as possible is lubing the press. So one thing that you'll definitely want to do is have some lube on the ram itself. We use a 30 weight motor oil. Lee suggests that you can use up to a 40 weight motor oil, but not to use WD-40 or any kind of dry lube, as that is not going to be appropriate for the function of this press. Another thing that you could attempt to do is to lube the indexing rod here, but I would definitely use a small amount of lube there, as it is going to leave the majority of the remaining lube on the bottom of the shell plate. So you want to go a little bit of light on lube there. And then lastly, as I mentioned before, lubing the inside of the shell plate itself, and that'll help it to rotate smoothly through the indexing function to limit that friction as much as possible. So one thing that I didn't mention about the indexing system is the relationship between the ram and the shell plate carrier itself. The ram is made out of a cast iron material, where the shell plate carrier is a die-cast aluminum. The ram also has some teeth on it, and it is important that when you're setting this up for the first time that you do that shell plate carrier alignment properly, because as you tighten that draw bolt down, the teeth at the top of the ram are going to dig into the shell plate to help it maintain its alignment through the life of the press. If you don't do that appropriately right at the beginning of owning this press, you are going to run into an issue where that shell plate carrier is going to continuously slip backwards, whether it is falling back into the old teeth marks from when it was inappropriately aligned, or that there are no teeth marks for it to fall into, so it can just kind of slip over time. So it is important to make sure that you get that set up right out of the gate. Otherwise, you may have to replace the shell plate carrier to ensure that you're getting smooth operation over a long period of time on this press. If you found this video to be helpful with getting your indexing system set up, be sure to like and subscribe our page. We will continue to make videos to help getting your presses up running smoothly. If there's anything that you would like us to make a video about in the future, feel free to leave it in the comment section below, or if you have any tips yourself, again, put it in the comment section. It'll help other reloaders out. I'm Michael, and as always, happy reloading.